What did I do? Oh boy. So, after ordering all of this stuff, because I'm getting sick of Corsair and their lack of compatibility with Gigabyte software, my motherboard is the Gigabyte Aorus Extreme Z390, and I'm running an i9 9900K. So, I need a 280 millimeter cooler for it because right now I was having issues with the Corsair stuff not working with RGB Fusion. And if I don't have RGB Fusion installed, the motherboard RGB goes insane. If I have RGB Fusion and iCue for Corsair installed, they work basically completely fine with each other until there's an update or if something changes in the background. Even Windows updates will do this and it glitches out completely, and then some of the fans will actually stop running. So it's like really concerning, especially for the setup that I have going on right now, because I've just put a 1080 Ti in. So I have the 1080 Ti in here, but it's so close to the edge here because I have the vertical GPU bracket that I had to take the fans off. So because I took the two 140 fans off, the only fans that are cooling this cooler are the 120s in the front. So I have two at the top that are hitting this perfectly, and then I have one in the bottom that's like kind of hitting it, like half, and then the rest is hard drive cooling or whatever. And then I have the 120 for the exhaust. So I only have four 120 fans in here right now that are doing all of the cooling. Now the internal temperature of the computer actually gets so warm that even at idle, sometimes you'll see these fans turn on momentarily just to bring the temperature back down a little bit. When I'm rendering videos, the CPU temperature on this gets to about 90 degrees, and that's with this 280 millimeter cooler with two 120 fans. So given that I'm hitting temperatures like that right now, if I go to a 240 rad, I don't think that's going to be enough surface area to actually cool the i9 running at 5 gigahertz on all the cores. So a 280 is an absolute must. At least just for the setup that I have going on right now, that's kind of where it is. I mean, some people might be able to get by with a 240, but in my testing and the environment that I'm in, everything, that's just not something that's going to work for me. So I need a 280 or a 360, but I didn't want to go with something giant, and I kind of wanted to shoehorn this motherboard back into a normal sized case. I was looking at cases and I found this one, the H510 Elite, which has a vertical GPU bracket, and because the front is so far forward compared to that one, I might be able to use my vertical GPU bracket in here just to keep it further away, so that way I still have airflow between the GPU and the glass to keep it a little bit colder. But that's not going to be a huge issue for my plan if this works out, because I bought the X62, so that's going to be for the CPU, so that's a 280 millimeter cooler, so that's going to be the CPU, and it's going to go up to the front with the AER RGB 2 fans that are included with the case. So this has two of them. This is for the back, so I'm going to have the two RGB fans here, the one here. I'm not going to run one on the top. So the case is going to solve the issues of the 1080 Ti not fitting, but also I haven't found anything so far of CAM software glitching out with RGB Fusion. So let's say that in a perfect world, I was able to get this working in the situation that I wanted, and I had the two 140 millimeter fans on the front instead of the three 120s. And everything's working, everything's fine. I'm still running into the issue of iCue and RGB Fusion glitching out because this case uses iCue, which means that even if I change the coolers, even if I change the fans, even if I get different RAM and I remove all the Corsair and everything, I still need a different case because the case still uses iCue. So this case is hopefully going to be solving all of those issues for me by running a full 280 rad, not Corsair. Still going to have the RGB fans for all that nonsense. I'm going to have the RGB fan in the back, but then you're probably wondering, well, why did I buy an M22 and a Kraken G12? This is for the GPU, obviously, GPU mounting kit. So this is going to allow me to put an all-in-one cooler on a GPU. Now, I didn't do much looking into this. That cooler is not compatible, and I didn't know that when I ordered these. So I kind of figured that out when they're arriving because I was trying to find just like guides and stuff on how to do this. I kind of just wanted to get a little ahead of the game in preparation for all of this so I have the least amount of downtime as possible and I can keep editing videos. Now, if we look at this, it says that it's compatible with the X series coolers. And if we go to the NZXT website, and at the top under PC components, we can go to cooling, and then right here we have Kraken X series, and then the Kraken M22. Why the picture's not coming up, I'm not too sure. But I needed a Kraken X series cooler. Okay, cool. I knew that because it said that I needed one. So I went here, and now the case only fits a 120 in the back, which means that I can only run a 120 cooler. So we go down here, the M22 is listed under the Kraken X series coolers. So I bought it, assuming that it would work, and it doesn't. Like, so that was why I thought that was going to work. After I looked into it, it's not like that, and that kind of explains why no one has actually done this. This uses your regular Asetek mount, which you can see right here, the regular Asetek mount, everything's normal. This one here in the picture, you can just kind of see it's like ridged around the edge, and it looks similar to as it would be. So when I was even looking at pictures, I thought the mounting on the back of the pump was actually the same. And it turns out that's not the case at all, because when you're actually mounting this, it has this weird little plate thing that like slides onto it and then gives you the 4 mounting holes. So I don't know if that's actually going to work. I'm still gonna try it, and hopefully I can get the height between the base of that onto the die of the GPU using that, and everything's actually fine. And then I can just kind of put this fan on there, and it's just happy and working together. But for now, let's just pretend I didn't. There, nothing happened. Hey, look at my new stuff, guys. This is all I bought. I didn't even make that mistake. Don't worry about it. So now for the time being, until I get that cooler situation sorted out, I actually can put the 1080 in there and then just run it in basically the exact same setup I have now, just replacing the Corsair stuff with NZXT, because I live in Canada. I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for that, but this is Canada. That's a Z. So in the next video, we're going to be ripping this thing apart, basically removing everything Corsair except for the RAM, because I haven't bought new stuff yet. But the RAM is compatible with RGB Fusion if I don't have iCue installed. So the RAM actually will still work, even though it's Corsair. The whole objective of this new project is to go anti-Corsair. So this is my complete anti-Corsair build. So this is a thread that I made on the Linus Tech Tips forum of the issues that I was having before. So after iCue updates, I frequently get these issues with the RGB not turning on and the lights and the fans just turning off, and then randomly the fans will actually turn off. And one of the related issues with this was it was everything associated with the RGB controller but the case itself that was actually glitching out. And if we go down here, we can actually see that the H115i, the RGB on the pump itself, and then the fans, they're working along with the RGB RAM and the motherboard. So all of that RGB is working, except the motherboard itself is controlled by RGB Fusion, and then the pump and the RAM are controlled with iCue software by Corsair. Now another one of the issues is just randomly that the pump and the fans will just turn RGB, and they'll just do it on their own for no reason, and I have to restart the computer to fix this. And then if I try and control the RAM using RGB Fusion instead of iCue, this happens, where I just have random colors, and I can literally turn it off and then back on, and it'll be random colors on different channels. So it's never the same outcome. And these ones are a little bit harder to see. It's the iCue software, and you can see that my case actually isn't showing up at all. And when I go to the RAM, same thing. So the software itself is actually glitched out, so the case and the controller that comes with the case is not showing up. And then after a lot of trial and error, I ended up disconnecting the 140mm fans from the H115i, and suddenly the case decided to recognize. And even though I was able to get all the RGB working, occasionally this will happen with the memory, where just the outside, the middle, and the bottom outside one, they'll light up red, and it'll just do this on random channels, and it'll only flash for about a second or two and then go back to normal. And with the all-in-one fans, the 140s, when they're unhooked, the fan on the rear just decided to start working for some reason, even though it was stuck displaying RGB. And then after uninstalling RGB Fusion and then restarting, all of the lights were working again, but everything was on RGB. I couldn't customize anything. And then here's just another shot of the 2 fans removed, and everything is now illuminated and working. However, right after posting this, the fan stopped spinning, and I got 1 red LED. And then on the front, I had yellow at the bottom, only 1 LED, green in the middle, blue on the top. These 3 fans remained spinning, which was good, because I don't have the 2 fans on the cooler, so those front case fans are the only thing cooling the CPU, but now I don't have an exhaust fan. Then some more searching, I ended up finding this video that said that RGB Fusion and Corsair iCue actually conflict with each other and corrupt each other's files, which actually makes a lot of sense now, because this seems to happen every time iCue has an update. So I ended up installing my new graphics card. It worked out that I had to remove those fans because there wasn't enough clearance anyway. As you can see, it's very tight up against the rad, but I was able to get everything working after a combination of installing, uninstalling, testing different programs one at a time, but eventually I did get it working. So you can see that the memory is individually addressable, each light is on its own, and everything's working fine. Now these were my 3 fixes. However, none of them are very good. The first one was to replace everything Corsair with brands that are RGB Fusion certified, so that way they can be hooked up with the Aorus hub instead of the Corsair one that comes with their hardware. Some thermal take coolers are very reputable. Those work, and pretty much everything by Cooler Master. So those are two good options for this, but I took a different route. You can rewire Corsair fans to actually be compatible with the generic RGB headers on the motherboard. There's a little write-up for that, but it was hard to find. But essentially you just cut the proprietary headers off of the Corsair fans and the RGB, and you just swap them with normal fan output connectors like the ones that go onto the motherboard. So you can use either the standard ones or the PWM one, depending on how many wires you're using for the RGB. And you're basically just making like your own makeshift connectors for the RGB. However, that won't work for the pump because the pump is integrated through USB and it needs software to control it. And then the third one, which worked for me, but then didn't work for me, but is now still working, is that RGB Fusion saves the RGB settings in BIOS. When I install the program, set the RGB, when I restart the computer, it saves all that information without being in Windows to actually remember that it was installed. I set everything that I wanted to, uninstalled it, restarted the computer, I was back in Windows and all of the RGB remained. So then I installed iCue, and now I have iCue installed, and I can control the Corsair stuff, but the motherboard is just set to the default that it was at. However, something happened, and RGB Fusion now requires their software to be installed. So the EVGA software is not installed, but that was able to fix this at one point by having all three of them. It just kind of made some sort of trifecta of glitches where it all ended up working but then stopped working, and I ended up having to uninstall the EVGA software, uninstall RGB Fusion, only run the iCue software, and then I had to install RGB Fusion again because after a few more updates or a Windows update or something, it ended up forgetting those settings, and I just left it installed because the iCue software was continuing to work from there. And then the same thing happened that we started all of this with. I installed the EVGA software, set the GPU RGB, and everything is still currently remaining working with that sort of series of glitches that glitched itself back out. That's why I'm getting rid of everything Corsair, as well as the other video that I posted a little while ago from 2019 showing the quality or lack of for Corsair products. They're just too expensive for how terrible they are. They look good, they just don't work very well. They're like the Apple of PC hardware. They're expensive, and you have to do everything that they say, otherwise they don't work, and they're not compatible with anything else. So we will get into actually building this computer next week. I mean, there wasn't really much insightful information here other than my fix for the RGB. So I mean, if you're having issues with RGB Fusion and iCue software, install EVGA software and hope for the best. Install it in the series of iCue first, and then RGB Fusion, and then EVGA software. Hopefully all of your stuff glitches out in the same order that mine did, and yours will just work. And then when it stops working, just repeat this, because I did this twice now and it worked both times. Anyway, that's it for this one. Subscribe if you haven't. You can get the updates on how this build is going to progress as it goes, or don't. I don't know. It doesn't matter.